Hi, my name is Susan MeeLing. You can go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com. As I have put on my website, as I have put in several of my fact books, I am a legal widow. I have a legal widow last name, so in reference to my three-volume book series, The Adventures of Susan MeeLing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, I have put in there that I have a legal widow last name. My legal first name and my legal middle name are Susan MeeLing. And so in The Adventures of Susan MeeLing, Scuba Diver Extraordinaire, I have given the list of books that I had authored and compiled together. Same thing in reference to my website, which I am the only one who takes care of my website for clarification. So all of the different editions and what have you of that, I did on my own. It took me a very long time to figure out how to navigate that sort of stuff, especially since I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I, at one point in time, was much better with technology. I was actually far more capable in regards of the coding, but after waking up from my head injury, from my coma time frame, I was in basic training during the time at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. In 1998 was the last time that I had done coding when I was in New Jersey. And so the time frame from 1998 to essentially 2014, I had not done any coding whatsoever in the ways that I knew coding. My biological mother worked for Prudential in Homedale, New Jersey in the 1980s and 1990s. Those who have parents, legal guardians, you know that there are certain things that you assist with. And so one of the things I assisted with was coding. And I got to learn quite a bit about it and the aspects in regards of the technology and how it was going to go. I could see all of these different things. I was a huge dork when it came to so many things. I took Latin by choice. I was excited to take Latin too. And then when being moved from New Jersey to Illinois, there were a few things that I was upset about. One, I was extremely upset that we were going from cable internet to net zero. That I was not okay with, and I was a teenager. In the year of 2021, there are those who understand how that goes for cell phone technology. So essentially think about how you can have Wi-Fi and hotspots and all that stuff, but when your cell phone has issues, how those problems are as far as attitudes are concerned, especially when it comes to teenagers. And so I was a teenager. I was almost 16 years old at the time. And I was told, for a more modernized view of that, I was told in that time frame of 1998, we were going to go from the equivalent of Wi-Fi technology to dial-up. It wasn't Wi-Fi, it was cable fiber optic sort of stuff. However, I was almost 16 years old and I was extremely upset. And I was a massively huge dork. I still am a dork when it comes to that, because I am. I still am glad that I took the Latin courses that I took. That Latin, in regards of Greco-Latin or Roman Latin, which is the basis of 5 languages, was extremely helpful when it came to the after effects from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. So in reference to my scuba diving, I earned 26 scuba diving certifications because I'm that much of a dork. I was in the process of going through the application to MAST, or Marine and Science Technology School. I had a personal invitation to apply to MAST, and I went through not only the invitation process of going and filling out the form, and then the second process was the essay format, and then the third process was going through the equivalent of an ASVAB test for those who understand military. Then the fourth process was the first interview, and then their fifth process was the sixth interview, and the seventh process was the third interview. And it was as explained that there was only one thing that was a problem, which happened to be that I am a female. That's the one question that I got. There was the issue with, in comparison to just accepting that. So the Marine Corps connection with the Navy connection, and assumedly in certain ways the Coast Guard, I would guesstimate, they had made multiple contacts to my biological mother and biological father to allow me to go. And the problem was then that my biological sister just wasn't going to do it. She wasn't interested in it to begin with. She wasn't ever going to accomplish it. But because of her issues, which you can see in certain ways now, the terminology is American exceptionalism. So it's where you lower the standards or you lower the ball of the curve, such as in colleges, where you lower the ball of the curve for the intellect level. And when you do stuff such as that, then there are certain situations that occur. Well, when I woke up from my coma and went through a bunch of different tests, I was found, according to the tests, to have gone from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to second grade math. And I had made the joke back in 2000 and back in 2001 that if I could ever get into a college, as far as being a student, that the entire education system would have to be completely redone. I made that joke back then. So I earned 26 scuba diving certifications all by myself. And the only issues that I had mainly had to do with the mathematics. And so my problem was in reference to the conversion in my thoughts in regards of when scuba diving, but on land in regards of my test format. So I had issues with converting the atmospheric measurements, which is one atmospheric measurement, to 33 meters, which 33 meters is 3 feet. And so it's essentially 33 times 3 times 3 to get the mathematics. And so, while I acknowledge I may have misunderstood certain aspects of the conversions for the atmospheric measurements when it comes to scuba diving, however, I had earned my open water National Geographic scuba diving certification first, and then I went through the different processes because of what I personally needed for myself, for my type of scuba diving. Now, I'm medically retired from the Army. My scuba diving has my background in it. And so the requirements for my scuba diving had to do with making sure that I had the safest scuba dive for each and every individual scuba dive, which means that it had to be the safest descent, the safest scuba dive, the safest safety stops, and the safest descents for each and every scuba dive in all totality, but also each individual one. Well, I took the different certification classes so that way I could make sure I knew my gear. The other benefit of knowing my gear, meaning where I had everything placed as far as so I had a what's called a Farmer John scuba dive suit. It's a two-piece wetsuit. It's long pants and straps up here, and then long sleeves is the second part with shorts. And I would wear that even in the middle of the summer, even when I went scuba diving out in Cozumel or Cancun and out in Boca, as well as the Florida Keys. I wore that for a multitude of reasons. I can make a joke about my outfit right now. However, even with the colors of my shoes. And so, I'm subtle that way. As subtle as could be considered for that. Anyway, so I had earned my 26 scuba diving certifications. And again, I have my legal widow last name, just as I have my legal enlisted maiden last name. However, my legal widow last name at that time, which is still the same thing, is what's on my scuba diving certifications. I posted pictures of my original scuba diving certifications on my updated, newer Facebook account because of certain situations that occurred as to how I wound up in Washington State in 2013. I've gone over that. You can go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, and look through my journal blog, The Ornery PSA. You can also go and purchase my books on Amazon. The links are in my website in the different book sections that are broken down by genres. This is how much of a dork I am. And so, in reference to my scuba diving certifications, there at the time at International Scuba had been a bundle package where you could earn 16 different specialties for $800. I was told by the owner at the time, Patty Stewart, that nobody had ever completed all of the specialties. And I was very confused by that because of how I am, especially after my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I had to make sure not only that I understood the knowledge, but I comprehended it. So I did all sorts of extra work because that's how much of a dork I am. And I gave myself homework because that's the type of person I am, where I have to do certain things in order to feel that I achieved a certain level, especially after waking up from my coma, because of all of the different tests I went through. I have tattoos because of my memory deficits. My hair is short and bright red. The red has multitudes of meanings. There are spiritual meanings, there are significances in other ways as far as my hair color. But my hair style is because my hair is heavy. I'm half Chinese and half a bunch of the rest of ethnic backgrounds with the exception of a few. And so my hair is extremely heavy. People who don't even have heavy hair know the difference when it comes to hair length and the weight. Well, I deal with headaches and migraines. So shorter hair, as I learned, I actually had to learn this, the shorter my hair, the less amount of pain, except for the fact that I got accustomed to my hair length. to the point where I can tell if my hair is past a certain aspect and my headaches get much worse. Same thing with my migraines. And so currently my hair, I haven't gotten a haircut in about 2 weeks, and my migraine levels are through the roof. But it's one of those, I really wish I could have long hair. I'm not in a negative way, but acknowledging my own envy. I wish I could have long hair. And so it is what it is. Everybody's their own worst critic, so I know how I look and all that sort of stuff. I've been told, especially in that reference. But the aspects of my hair, I really wish I could have long hair. I really do. You can do so much more with it than short hair. But I have my hairstyle the way it is. And there were a bunch of people, especially from the year of 2006 to the year of 2012, that thought it was just a fad. Or at minimum, that's what they told me. They also didn't believe me about my headaches and migraines. They thought that my tattoos were a fad, which they weren't, and they aren't. Each individual tattoo of mine assists my memory. Each tattoo of mine has more than just the association regarding the time frame of getting my tattoo, each individual one, but it also has to do with other factors in regards to both my pre-head injury on Palm Sunday 2000 time frame, as well as to the time frame regarding when I got the tattoo. So I went scuba diving out in Florida. One is in Boca, as far as 2 different scuba dives, and another scuba dive is out at the Vandenberg. So there's a picture of me from, I think it's the year of 2010, or possibly 2011, where there are bruises on my lower part of my legs. And you can see one-ish. That has to do with a picture that I took when I was at the Vandenberg after I handled a situation, a few situations. And so while it is known in regards of the Coast Guard and the Marine Corps and the Navy, not just to the size of the USS General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, but also the requirements regarding cruise ships and regular boats going on the surface area, as well as submarines going in the middle area above where the Vandenberg is. The Vandenberg was sunk to assist creating an artificial reef. So it can't really be in an area that moves. You can't have a submarine go by and it just gets, you can't have that. That would not help the coral reef. It wouldn't. I'm fairly certain people would know that, but if you didn't know that, surprise. So, pre-head injury, I had a lot of experience in the Atlantic area of the ocean. The first time I actually ever went swimming in freshwater in comparison to saltwater was when I went to Baptist Camp Lebanon. Other than that, I swam in a pool or I went swimming out in the ocean. So there's this particular tattoo. And this particular tattoo can be referred to both in reference to my scuba dive down in the Vandenberg area, but also in reference to the water at Baptist Camp Lebanon. There were a few situations that I had to take care of, and it was as it was. There were certain underwater things. I didn't ask them what their name was as far as certain species. I had thought it was kelp, and then when I had gotten out of the water and asked the camp counselors what is in that freshwater area, And they had said, oh, it's, what are you talking about? They said that they drained the lake once a year because of checking for certain things. They would wait until the end of summer camp and then drain all the water out of there to see what was there. But it wasn't kelp and it wasn't seaweed that was down there. And I had a few situations. I'm alive. This is the 5th of December, 2021. And so this was the leg, ironically, that I usually had to deal with certain things. So in regards of my pictures when I went scuba diving at the Vandenberg, I made the joke way back when in 2009, that, yeah, I took your pictures, I'll give you a name when I feel like it, because I handled a few things. And so I also figured the people that I knew at the time would simply just ask me. I kind of figured that the people that I knew in 2009, 2010, 2011, and 2012 would just simply be like, hey, you did some scuba diving and you took some pictures, and giving the verification of who they were at the time that I knew, we have questions in reference to your pictures, your scuba diving, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Here is a recommendation of these particular groups, agencies, organizations, or what have you, as well as business, whatever, that have questions about that. Instead of that occurring, because that would be common sense, just saying, it would be common sense, that didn't occur. I wound up in Washington State instead and dealt with a bunch of other things. Took care of it, is what it is. I took care of a lot of things in that reference. Again, I'm alive, so there is that. Anyway, so I took care of the situations, and I took the pictures, and then there's the adventures of Susan MeeLing, scuba diver extraordinaire, again to the reference of having already acknowledged my legal widow last name, which is Nichols. I've gone over that. However, I've gone by Susan MeeLing far longer. So there are those in New Jersey and the 5 boroughs of New York City, as well as Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And my biological father had done business out there. He had a jewelry business. He went to the School of Bulova. And because of the way I grew up, I knew better than to ride somebody else's coattails, especially my biological father's. And so instead of telling people my maiden last name, which some people knew, I very much just let them know my name is Susan MeeLing. That was it. So pre-head injury, I had been known by that. After my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, after waking up from my coma, after my legal marriage to who I'm a legal widow of, during the first separation, was when I remembered that. And it was, oh yeah, I need to do that for myself, because that's how I've always been known by some of my closest of closest. And so it's just easier that way. And so I just went by my legal first and legal middle last name. And I know that I can go through the process of removing the legal widow last name and all that. I have this weird thing where I wanted to make sure my son and my daughter didn't have certain problems. And because they were minors at the time. I mean, I had my son only a year and a half-ish after waking up from my coma, when I still had that subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. And I had my daughter 2.5 years after waking up from my coma, where I still had that subarachnoid hemorrhage in the frontal lobe of my brain. Sure did. I was the one who knew that. I don't know who figured it out back then, or if it took me putting it in writing for that to be figured out, but it is what it is. So I'm alive yet again, and so I've made the joke that I'm a scientific anomaly because of a lot of situations that I've been in that most people really either A, wouldn't survive, B, would be far too petrified and scared to even think as to what the probabilities would be. And I could go down the alphabetical list with different subsections and stuff like that. I did grow up in New Jersey. There is a possibility I met either a Hebrew or Jewish individual, maybe somewhere in New Jersey, or the 5 boroughs, but somewhere in New Jersey, or a lawyer, or I could have met a Jewish lawyer. Has anybody heard of one of these? I don't know. I got to hang out with Yentas and Yetis, and I was that child that enjoyed that. That was me as a child. And it's like, oh, Yeti! Hi, Yenta! Yeah, I was that child. Yes, I was. It's been forever. How are you? I'm so excited. Hi! Especially at Asher Holmes Elementary School. Yeah. So Yenta and Yeti, and you want to talk about, there are those who have told me that they view things in a competitive way. There is no competition. When you grow up in New Jersey, when you get to hear Yentas and Yetis that are related, and they have different children in the same school or the same state, going to different schools in that state. No offense, Texas. That takes a certain level. That's a whole different ball of wax, completely, when it comes to that. Especially when it comes to sibling issues, which is something I warned people about when it came to the state of Texas. And so I got to hang out with Yentas and Yetis. And then there's the fact that there hasn't been any recognition in the proper ways in regards of my scuba diving, which by this point in time, you know where the majority of those Yentas and Yetis are, and I respected where I came from. I'm just gonna leave it at that. I know better. My son and my daughter, they did not ever have that background. And at one point in time in Washington State specifically, I had taken my son to Temple Beth Hot-Philo in Olympia. And while I was driving, I looked over to him and I was like, hey, James. And he's like, yeah. And I said, you will not ever, at any point in time, complain about me asking you questions. Because the way I, as a mom, with both my son and my daughter, how was your day? What happened at school today? Did this happen? Did this happen? Who did you speak with? There are those who understand what happened here, what happened here, what happened here, what happened here. By the way, I love you. Let me clear up. You got something on your face. I'm done. There are those who know. No, look, look at your little ears. So there, I am how I am. my little schmook. I know Yiddish. And so, just a smidgen little oy vey sort of thing, like, hi, you guys, hi. And so, in regards of my son being with me when I went to Temple Beth Avila, I'm like, you're gonna learn how I grew up, but you are only gonna have, a few experiences with this. However, just remember this one experience, which is Purim when we went. We went during Purim, the festival of, where Esther's revealed and all that sort of stuff. And timing. So, I take him in there and here you go, hi. Where can I help? Oh, I'll go help in the kitchen, that's fine, no problem. And so after that, my son goes, you are correct, I won't ever complain about you asking questions again. I didn't realize that there would be so many questions, and I was like, yes, that's a thing. They have to be, there's many reasons why, but there is kind of they want to know and get to know and all that sort of stuff, and there is that. And so he didn't ever complain about me asking him questions after that. He also didn't complain about me telling him, same thing with my daughter, as far as, I love you, James, I love you, Lydia, I just want you to know, just in case, I just want you to know, just in case, that you know that I love you, I'm your mom, I love you, and, I just care that way. And so, I wasn't dressed this way, for clarifications. I don't really think there's that much wrong necessarily with, although my son, at one point, he saw me in a gown. Just one time. I had ordered something online, it came in, I put the gown on, and my son looks over and he, Mom, what, James? And he goes, you're a girl. Yeah, I'm a female. I go by that. However, how do you think you and your sister were born? Who do you think carried you and delivered you? And well, you did, Mom, but you actually look like a girl. Yeah. I can do that, there are those who understand that, and so, normally I wore jeans and a t-shirt or pajama pants around, where we were living, whatever it was. So he didn't really see me dressed up. He also didn't see any of my modeling pictures, so he had no idea about that. He also did not get to really see my scuba diving pictures at all. And so he did in 2013, going into 2014, he got to see those. And, it is what it is as far as my photo albums and that situation. Nonetheless, in bringing that back around to the scuba diving portions, I had earned my 26 scuba diving certifications on my own. I didn't have an assigned, it was for the class. So when I got into my classes, I'd have an assigned scuba dive buddy. However, for all of my individual 26 scuba diving certifications, because I wasn't in a relationship, I didn't ever have someone that was, I guess the term is built in. And so I didn't know about any of the nuances. Nobody informed me of that until essentially after earning or almost to the time frame of earning my last of my 26 scuba diving certifications, that there was anything in reference to tipping. That wasn't ever brought up. There wasn't anything on the credit card receipts. There wasn't any discussion until literally I think it was either the 29th or the 30th of September, or sometime at the latest in the middle of October of when I was told that apparently you're supposed to do certain things when it came to scuba dive instructors, which didn't make sense to me. It didn't cross my mind. I explained why I got involved with scuba diving. It had to do with the Jewish Medical Journal. I'm medically retired from the Army. There are certain things in that reference where the bylaws don't allow certain things when you do it in a certain way. And because I was doing it in reference to the after effects of my head injury, as far as my headaches and migraines, the educational portions in that reference for myself, and all these other factors, it didn't make any sense why I was being told that. I figured that was only for the civilian sector because I explained why I got involved with scuba diving. That's just the reality. And so yesterday, or technically this morning, probably around like 3 o'clock in the morning, I had looked it up, and so I earned all of the 16 scuba diving certifications. In fullness, I earned a total of 26. However, the 16 that I earned, it was $800 total. It's a bundle package. And so I wanted to earn each and every scuba diving certification in those 16 bundle packages available because I knew that it would be best for me. I didn't know, once again, about any nuances or anything like that. Nobody informed me. I wasn't going anywhere except for around the state of Texas. The majority of my scuba diving certifications were done either out of Clear Springs Scuba Park or the Huntsville Quarry. In comparison, there are a few that I had earned in Lake Travis and even fewer that I earned in Aquarena Hot Springs. There was only a total of 2 or 3 certifications that I earned at Aquarena Hot Springs. There were about 4 or 5 that I earned at Lake Travis, and then the rest of them were earned at either Clear Springs Scuba Park or Huntsville Quarry. That was it. And I camped out because it was one of those, well, you know, it's however many hour drive back to my house at that time, my home at that time. And it just was easier. I had arranged where my son and my daughter could spend time with their cousins who are in my ex-in-law aspect, and they could have that time in reference to their biological father. I had made it a big point in my choice, even though of being an ex regarding that time, and then of course being a legal widow, I did not want to be the stereotypical ex-wife. I wanted my son and my daughter to not go through what I had seen others go through. Now, the irony is in reference to my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister, and then my ex-in-laws, essentially doing that instead because of their own issues within their own stuff, because of their own personal problems, hypothetically, in comparison, because none of them paid attention to how many times I had prophesied. And because even afterwards, they didn't pay attention to how much I prophesied, well before 2009, by the way, or even before 2008, and my accuracy of it was as it was. And so when getting my son and my daughter to have time with Grandpa Nichols, in literally just in time, because they had, luckily for them, 3 months before Grandpa Nichols had passed on. And so I wanted to make sure that they had that. I didn't want to take that from them. I wanted my son and my daughter to have that time with their grandpa. It was important. I wanted them to be able to spend time with him in person, face to face and in person, in comparison. I didn't ever want that to be taken from them. I thought it was important. And so I made those choices. My biological mother, biological father, and biological sister didn't see any importance to that. It was as it was. They had their issues. They essentially did as they did. Same thing when it comes to my ex-in-laws in comparison. And so it is what it is. I didn't ever want to be that type of a person, where it would be out of bitterness of purposefully doing something to negatively, purposefully cause harm to someone, needlessly. It, in my opinion, was important to do it that way, so that my son and my daughter always knew, as well as whatever extensions, that I made every attempt possible. That was my choice. I can't say the same in regards of other individuals. Maybe it's because of the after effects from my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 regarding specifically my memory deficits, my cognitive disorders. Maybe it's because of that, as well as life experiences, that I know if you don't want to ever waste time. It's, forget your, Southern Standard Time. You don't have that luxury. Life is much shorter than you realize. You don't know what somebody else's time frame is. You don't know what time frame you have. So to waste time is not an option for me. It hasn't ever been an option for me. I was born and raised in New Jersey. People who grew up in New Jersey, especially in the 1980s and 1990s, though those who worked in New Jersey, as well as the 5 boroughs in New York City, you didn't ever waste time. You maximized every possibility that you could with your time. Because even if you were taking care of other things, as long as you were actually doing something that was productive and not wasting time, okay. But if you were wasting time and being lazy, then that's when you get looked down upon. Well, I knew better. So, and I still do the best that I can. I don't waste time as best as I can. There is no need for that. There's no excuse for that. There's no reason for that. If you have the capabilities to get certain things done in a timely manner, that's when it gets done. You don't waste time. You don't dilly-dally and, whenever I feel, no. You don't do that. Definitely not to someone who was born and raised in New Jersey, and then the additional factors of the military portion. When you add the fact of how people are when it comes to technology and how many are about instant gratification, you do have to take in consideration when it comes to instant gratification, you need quality in comparison to quantity. However, you don't waste time. Anybody who's ever had any issues with technology, you know what your issues are in that reference. So it has not been anything that I could personally understand when it comes to the amount of time that has occurred. So in the time frame of 2009, I didn't hesitate. I talked with people about my scuba diving. I did that all the way through to the time of where I wound up in Washington State. I actually had explained to the individual regarding Cowboys Dance Hall and the Stoney LaRue concert. I had actually explained my scuba diving, and there was a response that was as it was. Nonetheless, I had repeatedly discussed it because I knew it needed to be discussed. I figured at some point in time, somebody wasn't going to waste any time and actually tell me who it was specifically I needed to speak with, especially after what happened in regards of my scuba dive gear. In that time frame, you can go and read about it, because there was a lot of stuff. nonetheless, initially getting back from scuba diving at the Vandenberg in Boca, I had told who at that time I was in a relationship with, I had told International Scuba about that. I had told a bunch of different individuals thinking that somebody would actually tell me who I needed to speak with, in comparison to me having to try to figure it out, which then there's the cognitive issues. And so instead of anybody having done that back then, which common sense, nothing ever occurred, but a whole bunch of stuff happened in my life. Whole bunch of problems instead of just telling me who to speak with. And then the irony, again, in reference to all of those different situations, what was the actual things that I needed to do? I didn't hardly ever get a response. I actually had more no answers than I did actual responses. That has not changed, which is really annoying in so many ways, because the amount of times that I had actually sent out emails, made phone calls, went to the different areas, instead, it was a runaround. And it's one of those, why are you wasting time? What is it that you think about your clock that you think that you have more time than you actually do? Okay, fine. And the irony is, I was told, well, you're a little anxious. Yes, I am. There's important things that need to happen. Yeah, it kind of is extremely important. And it's not just because it's my daughter in that reference and my son and I, there's a few other things. And so I don't understand why you are wasting time, because realistically, what is your thought as far as what your clock is? What do you think your clock is? Do you think you have that much time? And I actually said this to a particular individual, and then there was a train situation that had occurred. And so it is what it is. Why waste time? It's a very bad idea. But anyway, I had very much gone over my scuba diving where I could. Nobody at that time actually knew what my clearance was when I had been 17 years old in basic training. Nobody knew that until I put that in writing. Until my first book, Finding a Silver Lining, written by me, Susan MeeLing. I am a reverend. I'm an ordained reverend. I'm also a confirmed member of the Presbyterian Church. And so I figured that if somebody would have known who to speak with, they would very easily have said, hi, my name is Eminenza. They would have told me, or I would have received a letter, or I would have received an email, or I would have received a phone call, or I would have had an actual way to actually know who specifically to speak with. Instead, it went the way it did, and it still technically is that way. It'd be great if that wasn't a problem. It would be so awesome if I could actually, but that is what it is. Because it's been since 2009, and yeah, it's been since 2009. Did you, if you ever looked at my scuba diving pictures, there's some stuff I took pictures of. Such as, there's what you can see of a tentacle. Again, in reference to that. So that's a more future time compared to pre-head injury time. It's a yellow tentacle. I defended myself against that. I mean, by technicalities, I defended the islands nearby, as well as the state of Florida and the entire Atlantic area of the ocean, as well as the Gulf of Mexico area. But you know, what's the big deal in reference to that? Tentacle that was from underneath where the Vandenberg actually is sitting, because the Vandenberg landed near a cliff to a trench in the abyss. That's where it landed. So that tentacle attached to an octopus-looking thing that had some wings and kind of feet-ish, something, it's a weird-looking thing, was still climbing up from underneath the area. Took the picture, you just gotta go find it on my website or through my social media, it's there. I just defended myself and the entire against it, that's all. That's all I did. But apparently nobody else has ever thought about it, seen it, I don't know, I really don't. It's one of those, like, it's literally bright yellow. For those who know about underwater photography, you know that as you go down certain atmospheric measurements, certain colors you don't see in the rainbow. And it literally goes, when you go downward, you lose the color red, you lose the color orange, you lose the color yellow, you lose the color green, you lose the color blue, you lose the color purple, you lose the color brown, and you just kind of have whatever color the water is. I have the picture for that one where it's the American flag hanging off of the mast, which is, you know, a bar like this. It's a huge American flag. You cannot see the red and you cannot see the blue. However, that tentacle is so close that you can see the yellow in the picture I took. Did anybody ask me what that was? No, that would be making sense. That would be total common sense. Total common sense to ask. Or at minimum, you know, if you yourself cannot have the answers and you know someone who does have the clearance, you could have let me know that sometime between 2009 to now, in 2021. It'd be great. It'd be so much easier to go over that instead of the constants of just the constant. How many, like, who did I contact? Is there anybody else? I don't understand it. I really don't, because it makes sense to me to not waste time. Now, again, in reference to the depth level, yeah, I did 2 safety stops. Sure did. For those of you who don't know, it's in the Bermuda Triangle area, and if you just aren't aligned in certain ways, you're just not going to have those capabilities. It's just how it is. It's not anything rude. Those who have been out on the ocean know you're not going to tell the ocean what to do. The ocean is going to let you know what you're going to do. That's kind of how that goes. And so it's the Bermuda Triangle area. It's not in the central area, but for those who know about the Montana vortex, all you have to do is go there and learn about some of the different-ish equations. It's not really along the same lines, but it gives you a viewpoint of. And so if you are not naturally capable, it just is what it is. So yeah, I landed at the bottom. It was a quick descent. Wasn't a problem, I mean, at all, whatsoever for me, until, you know, I had to handle certain situations, and that is what it is. So it's cute. I also find the anglerfish cute. So I think the anglerfish, but for those who don't find the anglerfish cute, I like platypi. I think platypi are so cute. Complete opposite ends of the spectrum of cuteness. But they're still cute. I like manatees too. but I also do like bears. Yeah, I really do. I like bears. I have a thing. I really like bears. I think that they're cute. And I know that they're, whatever. That's fine. They're still cute. I like them. And I know that there is the difference between the fluffy teddy bears that I like, and then, I was born and raised in New Jersey, and I grew up going to the 5 boroughs. Hey, you guys. How you doing? I know you have an allergic reaction to, that's okay. I get it. It's okay. I have no problem with it. It's okay. I'm fine with it. It's okay. I am very envious, not in the negative way. I am a fan of RuPaul, let me tell you. I know she's not a bear, I know that, but I bet she roars. I know that for certain. She has to roar. In her own way. Or his, depending on what she's wearing. Anyway, I suppose I could make a joke if I'm in a corset, Lady Dori Belle, right? And then, when I'm in jeans and a t-shirt, it's Susan, but at the same time, I can't really say that about the corset thing because I've told people my name is Susan. So in a corset, it's either Susan MeeLing or Lady Dori Belle. And in jeans and a t-shirt, it's Susan MeeLing. But now that my son and my daughter are biological adults, it's no different than whether I'm dressed up or not. It's the same. I'm no different. I have done modeling in pretty much every type of clothing for the most part. Yeah, I can wear bikinis on land. I can't wear that in the water. I learned the hard way, both pre and post head injury. It's a bad thing, but anyway, can wear it on land where there's no water that I'm swimming in, except for my ocean tattoo. Anyway, so it is something that I haven't understood in regards of my scuba diving. I have not ever understood how there hasn't been anybody that was like, hi, again, Eminem song, hi, hi, my name is, and that song's gonna be in your head from now on. For a while, you know how that goes. But anyway, nobody had told me that. And it wasn't that I was expecting it, I was hoping. Because I knew that even though the scuba dive community is small in comparison to other communities, I figured with an even smaller number being instructors, that there would have been somebody who would have walked up and been like, hi, my name is, and, this is my whatever, as far as verification is concerned, and I need to ask you some questions about your scuba diving, because I figured, and this is back in 2009, by the way. In 2009, I figured, okay, I earned 26 scuba diving certifications all by myself. And I don't think there's many individuals who have done that. I was told so. I was told that there wasn't anybody who earned 16 scuba diving specialties. So, okay. All right then, I achieved that, that's fine. Now what? I mean, I have my idea as far as the underwater travel system that I came up with back when I was a child. I mean, that is part of the poster that I had earned the ability to meet Governor Christine Todd Whitman, which is before Marine and Science Technology School with the Navy attachment. I had fully come up with the entire design as far as that was concerned back then. I'd already done all the research, made sure of different things, looked up different materials as far as what combinations and so on and so forth. The different aspects, the mapping it out, the whole kit and caboodle. Had the whole thing taken care of back in 8th grade. And then I was moved to Illinois when I was a teenager, just before I turned 16 years old. And so when it came to 2009, I figured, okay, well, there's obviously a system for scuba diving because I have my certification cards. There has to be somebody somewhere. And, my thing was I was going to get my gear to the Navy and Marine Special Warfare Unit, but because of everything that was going on in my life from 2009 up until 2012, for this reference, I needed to make sure that my gear was taken seriously, put in the correct area, and properly maintained. Because the individual that I knew at the time, and was dating-ish. I mean, we didn't ever make it public because he didn't think it was an idea at that time. And it is what it is as far as that's concerned. I guess I was a little bit too much of an embarrassment, I suppose. Whatever it is, it is. But that's back then. And so he left, and it is what it is. And that particular situation, he had caught a poofy fish when we were in Cozumel, and I could only do so much to help at the time. And so when I had begun to tell him about the Vandenberg dive, there was a situation and I didn't ever get to give him the vials. I had hoped one day that there would have been something that I could have done that would have been able to assist despite how things went, but that requires more than a few minutes. That's something that requires a lot more, and that is what it is. So I had these vials that I had kept in a specific type of container. And when I had made the mistake of talking with one person and one person only about my gear, I was literally the following year, not known at the time, but I was going to be moving to San Antonio. I was in a different relationship at that time in 2011, and the individual I was involved with did not take security seriously enough. And so because he didn't take security seriously enough, I was not capable of getting my gear to where I needed to get it to because he didn't take it seriously enough. And so it was one of those, I cannot put that at risk. It didn't matter that I'm a registered Republican. It was 44 at that time as far as President of the United States of America, and the Vice President then is the current President now, 46, Joe Biden. And it didn't matter who was in office. I was doing everything I could. There wasn't any assistance from anybody I knew. So if there were a bunch of people that had told, because of the political situation at that time, if they had told the Democratic Party that they had told this in reference to the scuba divers that they had done certain, no, they didn't. They didn't ever speak with me about it. I had made repeated attempts from essentially August of 2009 through to January of 2010, speaking with different scuba divers that I knew, hoping that there would have actually been somebody who could have just told me where to go, who to speak with. And, I guess I should have specified at that time. Well, that would be great now. It's kind of important. But in that reference, nobody told me what to do, so I made every attempt. And then there was the U-Haul problem of the situation regarding moving my stuff. There was in part the problem with that male who did not take security seriously, didn't see any importance as far as certain things were concerned. That is what it is. I grew up where, and he didn't know this, but my babysitter's husband, in regards to what would be a nanny sort of thing, her husband was the director of security as the World Trade Center director of security type of job, and I assisted in certain ways because he knew about my athleticism, he knew about my intellect, he knew about my memory, he knew how my school actually was as far as my grades in comparison to the grades that my biological mother, biological father, and biological sister were allowed to know about. And so my actual grades compared to what the report card said, very different. And it was for multiple reasons. So I assisted with that. The individual in reference to 2011 did not take security as seriously as he should have. And it was as it was at those times. So I had to make different plans to get my gear there. Well, again, my mistake. I apparently allowed that to rub off on me in the wrong way. My mistake, Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard guys, my mistake. I spoke with one person, and one person only, and then the U-Haul problem. And I got a letter in August of 2012 that, my stuff had gone through a lot situation, and it wasn't until after. They didn't give me any contact beforehand, even though they had my email, even though they had my phone number, even though they had the address that everything was going to go to. There was a police stop in the city of Austin. Where my biological sister and her whatever had done. And hypothetically only. Not that they would have known what to do with the gear properly, because it wasn't for them to go through. So it is what it is. Whatever is known about the Bermuda Triangle, that's not my problem that you didn't respect my choice. So that stuff, as far as those vials, they showed up in my townhouse that I was living in at the time. Well, if there's any situations regarding the Bermuda Triangle that's more well known, that's why. And in reference to the gear that would have been in there, I had gone through cavern scuba diving after going to the Vandenberg. So it wasn't the same gear as when I went to the Vandenberg at all. I mean, it was the BCD. The BCD was used for that scuba dive. That's it. I mean, there was my wetsuit, the Farmer John, and my booties and fins, but the gear, that, important factor of breathing, not the same regulators. At all. Not at all. Because I had that chili cook-off that occurred. That I earned first place. What could have been in there, I don't know. I had it arranged for me to present, not for anybody else. Very particular about quite a few things. So when there are needless circumventing, then there are problems that occur, especially when it comes to my scuba diving, especially when it comes to quite a few things that I'm extremely particular about. So when I arrange something, it means that that's the way it's supposed to be. There's not supposed to be any adjustments unless you speak with me and ask me. very particular. It does have to do with more than just the Bermuda Triangle situation. And so it is what it is. Nonetheless, the vials showed up, and because I didn't have the rest of my scuba dive gear to be able to take there, because it had to be presented in a certain way, as far as the Navy Marine Special Warfare Unit, because that did not occur the way it needed to, I had to make the choices. That was on me to do and nobody else, because it's my scuba diving. So I've made repeated attempts throughout the time frame of 2009 up to that point in 2012. Then I've still made repeated attempts from 2012 on to 2021. What is the situation? I've actually shown up to locations, given paperwork, I've mailed books, I've mailed letters, I've explained via my journal blog entries, I've gone on and on. I've written or authored 3 more books in reference to just on my scuba diving within the capacities that I could. I've gone over it in regards to my official YouTube account. At what point in time does it actually get taken seriously? I drove all the way down from Washington State to the state of Texas, showed up where my scuba dive school that I had gone to had been, went to make an attempt of, hey, let's do a barbecue. And if you guys want to go with me, because this is the only invitation you got to go with me scuba diving in reference to the Vandenberg. This is the only attempt I'm going to make, because any other is not going to happen. I could go back to scuba diving in reference to the Vandenberg. That's no problem. The problem is they didn't get the invitation because of the way the barbecue didn't go. So it is what it is. I thought it would have been cool, but my mistake. I apparently misunderstood, because I'm not a scuba dive instructor. I just earned 26 individual scuba diving certifications. And had that barbecue had gone the way that I specifically had designed it to go, I didn't speak with anybody because I wasn't in a relationship. Is what it is. So, okay, fine. No, that's fine. None of you need to go to the Vandenberg. That's fine. You can stay scuba diving in the surface interval areas, and that's it. That's all you need. You don't need to go scuba diving where I went. That's fine. That's okay. That's okay. You don't need that. You obviously didn't want it. Bye. Toodles. Surprise. That was, that's how you do a good surprise, by the way. Anyway, so instead, then I went and made every attempt possible in other ways. From 2019 all the way onward to this point of the 5th of December 2021. Again, wrote letters, did all this stuff. No, my scuba diving 3-volume series, you can't teach my scuba diving. You can go over the history of it. That's what you could do. That's a history class. Other than that, that's not my actual scuba diving, because that requires in person, face-to-face, in person. 2 people discussing this in person, going over the details, that stuff. You can't go off of anything else. You're not going to get it. It's not being rude. You can have your scuba diver instructor, whatever. That's not my background. That's yours. There's a saying, you have to unlearn certain things to be able to learn. Well, if you only go on what you've been taught and gone through in your whatever classes, this is not in any offense towards other scuba divers, whether you're a military, law enforcement type of scuba diver, or a civilian recreational scuba diver, as far as instructor. It's no offense at all. You have your regulations for your reasons. My scuba diving, that's not the same. Not at all. Just because it's got the same sort of ish setup, that's not my scuba diving that you do. At all. It's kind of like language. You can take the different, so remember I took Latin, the Greco-Roman Latin classes. You can take, because in Greco-Roman Latin it's the background of 5 languages. So in Spanish and in French, which are 2 languages of the 5, that Greco-Roman Latin is the basic tenet of the starting point. And go to multiple areas that speak French, and guess what? For the same whatever description of, you're going to have different French words. Same thing in reference to the Spanish language. You're going to have different meanings for a word or different words for a specific description. Same thing I would guesstimate when it comes to Italian. It depends on, especially Americanized Italian compared to Italy. But all the different languages have that. I would guesstimate, even in other countries that have just one overall language, in certain areas, there's certain specific wording. Here, there's this state that I lived in for a few years, in the state of Texas. What wording is different regarding Houston compared to San Antonio, compared to Austin, compared to Dallas, compared to Fort Worth, compared to East Texas, compared to West Texas? You don't even need other languages. That's just the English language in the state of Texas, for that example. So, since I earned the majority of my scuba diving certifications in the state of Texas waters, though all of them through the one school with the exception of one by reality compared to the technicalities in reference to my cavern scuba diving, you have that, scuba divers, for your reference as to your scuba diving compared to mine. You have military guys there and law enforcement guys there. Military and law enforcement can discuss the differences between their types of scuba diving. There's certain similarities, yes. Usually has to do with the gear, maybe even the hand signals. Not necessarily fully though. Same thing with different acronyms aren't necessarily the same. So in the civilian sector, whether you're a civilian scuba diver or a civilian recreational scuba diver, you're going to have differences compared to. So when it comes to my scuba diving, it's my scuba diving. So those 3 books that go over just the adventures or the history in regards of what I could go into as far as my scuba diving. That's what I could go into as far as explanations. I could have gone over that back then in 2009. Could have. I did in different areas and groups and communities, depending on who I spoke with, to a degree. However, I kind of figured common sense would dictate it'd be easier to actually clarify in comparison to what occurred. And so, sure, there's no denial, there's a bunch of different scuba dive instructors. But I had earned 26 scuba diving certifications. All of my certifications are from a large number of different instructors. There are a few that had been my instructor for more than one particular certification, but it was different certifications. So, my appreciation and regards up. However, again, remember, legal widow name compared to the name I go by. I'm not the only person who does this, by the way. In karaoke, there are people who have their karaoke name compared to, there are people in different lifestyle communities that go by whatever. I've gone by Susan MeeLing, again, far longer. Then I've gone by the name with my legal widow aspects. However, I haven't denied it. That's the big deal, is that I haven't denied that. Other people, that's your choice. Whether it's a correct choice or not, that's a whole other ball of wax. So in reference to how I sent my books to Noah, how I sent my, I can't even go into how much time, money, effort, etc. that I have here. No offense to 44 at the time, and who's currently 46 in reference to President of the United States of America, or your spouses, or your families. I made the attempts. It's not my fault that the rest of all of these other whatevers did it the way they did it. I know you have got to understand that. At this point in 2021. However, just because my biological sister had problems with the fact that I had my right to choose who I voted for, unlike how some people are, such as that reference, I don't hold a political party against an individual. I actually, it's kind of a thing when it comes to the military. You have to put the politics aside when there are certain things that are of extreme importance. You're allowed to talk about it. You're allowed to make certain comments. You're allowed that. You're allowed. But you still have to maintain and sustain your respect for who holds the office of the presidency. They are the commander-in-chief. That's the reality, of the armed forces while being president of the United States of America. So when it came to 2008 election, yes, I did not vote for who became 44. I knew he was going to become president. I knew that. I knew it. It just was as it was. But I was voting by choice for McCain and Palin, despite not agreeing that Palin was in the vice president seat. She should have been in the president's seat, and the vice president seat being where Senator McCain was. It's the knowledge and comprehension how certain things go. However, I made the choice that I did. In reference to 44, it wasn't anything against him. It was the fact of knowing that I had to go through certain protocols. Even though I'm medically retired from the Army, I have the Blue ID card aspects, and I understood and comprehended what that meant. I didn't need to explain that to people who didn't ask, especially people who didn't have the authority to actually ask. I shouldn't have ever been put into a position where I had to explain it to any civilians, as far as that transfer situation. However, I had no choice but to. As per my journal blogs from the times, if there's been any assistance in that regard from other clarifications once getting the transfer out to the East Coast, because there have been other situations that have been important to take care of. And so without an actual handler in that oddity of ways, because a handler is depending on, but there's other situations where I'm not in a relationship at all. And because I'm not in a relationship, there's no need for me to explain anything. Because I haven't ever officially been informed of having a handler, then that's none of your business sort of situation. When it comes to that, you actually have to protocol that. That's a mandatory thing. So if there are civilians who are like, well, let's do it this way, that's not the way that goes. There are specific processes as far as protocol is concerned, especially when it comes to my background. So I've gone over how I have a grandpa Gavitt, and my grandpa Gavitt assisted with creating a lot of different agencies and organizations in various sectors of the military and law enforcement and different departments. He had his favorite baby, and that is what it is. I don't remember what the alphabet soup was for that, because he had this whole printout sheet, well, typewriter, I should say, of the different alphabet soup groups that he had assisted with. That's something that happens. But his handler later on became my grandma, because that's just how that went, because of the time frame, because of a few different situations. It really was the only way that was ever going to be. From the explanation, it was something about they had tried to do it with one guy being a handler of the handler, and it just didn't work out because my grandpa Gavitt those who have met me in person and have seen me in action in regards of how when something needs to be done, it gets done. So the closest examples I can give would be like at Lackland Air Force Base, when it was a 4th of July celebration, and it was like, hey, James and Lydia, go scooch. I know that there's a situation. Go on the teacup ride. Take Grandma home with you. Go. Yes, have fun. I love you. Give me kisses, kisses. Yes, I love you. Be safe. Have fun. Go. Okay, here, you can hold my purse and my camera. I gotta go. And then, the bounce house situation and the strings that needed to be taken. And so like all those children that got to get out of the bounce house and get saved and stuff like that, that would be one example of how that went. So, Grandpa Gavitt, he would have been proud. He would have been so proud, especially he would have laughed as well, because of, oh, go on the teapot, spin it, because of he had certain issues with my biological mother, so, yeah, no, make it go so fast and spin it, come on, Dad. He would have been so proud of that. It is what it is. But that's one example. Another example is a Thanksgiving dinner in Austin, where it was, and you move here, and no, you do that, and so that's actually a really good example, in a very different way, of how my grandpa got it. Could easily be seen from that. For those who understand that particular type of individual, so those who were there who know that particular reference, I think it was 2000, I think it was either 2010, I think it was 2010, maybe 2011. Nonetheless, those who know what I'm referring to, as far as that Thanksgiving dinner, my grandpa got it in other situations. So just knowing, you go here, you do this, and taking care of stuff, and then whatever it is, and I can make a joke in regards of the color. I don't know, I mean, I'm very much into RuPaul. I get it, I'm not hitting on, I do appreciate, but I don't know, I mean, I like suits. But I think that this might be a little bit better. In regards of, making a joke in reference to, not a mean-spirited joke, just certain things in regards of my grandpa Gavitt and certain shadow boxes he had. There are reasons why my scuba dive colors and stuff and other lifestyle aspects. So, anyway, my grandpa Gavitt would be so proud of that. My buck poo, on the other hand, would have been very upset that I wasn't more verbal. I'll leave it as verbal because of how certain other situations were. But yeah, so I mean, even in that situation, that's the irony in regards of my buckgung and my buck poo. My buckgung actually had found out about my buck poo, and he had fallen head over heels for her, and he found out that she took care of things. She was half Cantonese and half Mandarin, and he was full Cantonese. And so at that time, before certain situations occurred regarding Mao Zedong, he had found her. And she was just being herself, and she was just taking care of situations. There are legends and lore of my buck poo. In regards mainly of, there's certain areas in Laos that there's a lore of someone who comes out and of the water and saves, from a snake or whatever, comes in and handles the situation, and people are able to get out of the rice paddies in time and stuff. That's my buck poo. There's a few other areas in China that my buck poo has certain legends because she traveled a lot until my buckgung was like, no. Not no, definitely not no, but more along the lines of, okay, you have to help with other things. Come on. And she did not want to. She actually... I'm very much like my buck poo in that regard. I really am. Yeah, no. She was extremely stubborn. So anybody who's known me in person, especially in person, face-to-face in person, or you could read my journal blogs, in reference to when being stubborn. When being stubborn, you can see my butt poo. Especially with my saying. because she had her own saying. I don't know what it was. I wasn't allowed to know those words. It is what it is, but yeah, no, she gave my buck poo. My buck poo had given my buck gong all sorts of sass, all sorts of sass. She had her way, and he was Cantonese. Yeah, she was half Cantonese and half Mandarin, but she was half Mandarin and half Cantonese. And so she had her ways. And he had made so many attempts. He had chased after her for, I think they said, when they told me about it, it was something like 5, 6, 7, maybe longer in years, like from when he first found out about her to when they actually, whatever, he came up behind her at one point in time, and he didn't know that she was extremely attuned to certain things, and so he came up to surprise her. I was not told what happened, other than he needed some time to take care of his wounds. And he knew not to do that again. He learned from what I was told. Mind you, my buck poo was about my height. Like I actually am about the same height without my heels as my buck poo was when she was, obviously still alive at that point. And my buck gong was about 1.5 feet, 2 feet taller than her. And and he had broader shoulders and stuff like that. And I actually really look very similar to my buck poo in a lot of ways. Like if you actually look at pictures of me when I had hair, that in comparison to this hairstyle, just put a little bit more olive complexion in my tone of my skin, and you could actually see I look exactly the way my buck poo did when she was younger and stuff like that. The eyes are a big, huge aspect regarding to that. And so my buck gong had fallen for her, like just all sorts of whatever. And well, she had spent some time out in the rice paddy fields, and she had been in different monasteries, even though her being a female, and this is back in the early 1900s, that she had been in these monasteries. And so, she earned her keep, meaning she did all the extra work so that way she didn't have to do other things. And so she survived that. And you could see that in my scuba diving, I guess, to me in some ways. And so when he found out about her, he was all like, well, you're just hi. And yeah, that was, yeah, it took him a few years to get her attention. And then the irony is when he got her attention, then he was like, oh, I have other things to do, because he didn't realize that she could pick up on things the way she did. So he got all scared. He got all scaredy-catted. But he couldn't not, because he was just, he had already, he was denying himself, essentially. And then he goes and he tries to whatever, and She had handled a few situations. He knew that she was strong. He thought he could do certain things. He was educated. And it wasn't anything really all that mean. It's just really funny, especially if, for those in various, well, I guess it doesn't even really matter what lifestyle. I mean, if you're into stronger females and stuff like that, who are still respectful and modest, he learned that he had to speak with her, and he learned not to surprise her because she had been through, she had been in the rice paddies. She'd actually go out at nighttime. She told me about this. She'd go out in the rice paddies at nighttime because there were certain times of the year that, for those that know, there are certain times of the year where the harvest season, you have only a certain amount of daylight and you need to get as much as possible. You don't waste time. And so because she was concerned about certain situations, you can see this in my scuba diving, she could essentially work at night and nobody know, because, where they had their camp set up, they weren't that far off, and if you really heard anything, it was just, that's just some branch of a tree that, something fell in the water, or, they just brush it off that way, or, a fish came out of the water and, splashed or something, and it was really my buck too. And she handled business. And they had a fantastic harvest after that. Yeah, she totally, she made sure that there wasn't any problems. Yeah, especially during certain years where there was a lot of stuff going on at the time. And so... She had handled some things during the evening hours, and she had told me about this. She had snuck into the water and she handled a few situations, and there was plenty of rice. There were a few extra, there was some extra food. Nobody knew how it got on land officially, but there was food. And it went fantastically with the rice. And I could make a joke about certain types of dim sum. How certain rice, or however you want to put it, and you mix and then there's the little wrapping and stuff like that. Because, you have a lot of bamboo in the area, and it naturally seasons certain things, and you have all of the ingredients nearby, so, But yeah, she was that way, and then my buck Gung, who had no experience with that whatsoever, nothing at all, could only ask people, and then because they were all, Mandarin in that reference compared to Cantonese, they did certain things to not tell the Cantonese the whole kit and caboodle on that. And so he went to surprise her. A few times, and it took him, according to what I was told, it took him um, a few times to learn it because there was a point where he had actually gotten so frustrated. I'm not having anything to do with her again, da 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 da, and he went looking at other females because he was looking at relationships at that time, and nobody could add up to her. There wasn't any female that had the same interests or anything. Like they'd have a little bit here or a little bit there or a little bit, and he'd go out with them and see, that's not really how it was explained, but it kind of was. And so when it was a several year thing, and she didn't even know she was being courted the entire time. It was funny, my buckpoo was like, yeah, I didn't even know he was interested in me at all. I mean, I had seen him, he was okay looking, but I had things that I needed to take care of. And it's like, yes, buckpoo, you're awesome. Yeah, she had no idea that he was interested in her, and he didn't actually tell a bunch of people either. And so they thought it was one thing, and it was as it was, because he was Cantonese, so he had multiple businesses. And so she was just doing her thing, and he was courting her, and she had no idea. And but he also had to be her handler at the same time, so it kind of worked out from what it was explained to me, because, or the version of, because he had certain businesses, and she just hit every mark. That's just really what it was. And when my buck Pooh told me about it, she was just like, yeah, well, your buck, he had learned. He was educated. That was her thing. He was educated. He was educated. And it got to the point, there was actually, so he had gotten to the point where I'm not going to have anything to do with her, da 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 da, rah, 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 temper tantrum. And so he was like, here, go in, here's a male, and she didn't even know, first and foremost, that she was being hit on, courted, or anything. So when this happens, she's just like, okay, whatever. This is back in the early 1900s. And, my buck gong, right when she essentially was going, well, I guess because she had been orphaned, is essentially what happened. When she was a teenager, her and her parents didn't get along. She was like the epitome of, in some ways, Mulan, in quite a few references. And she went, and it didn't matter, the family didn't get along, she knew what was going to happen in certain ways. So in certain references, if you've seen Mulan, she kind of really did fit that. And nobody in the monastery knew that she was a female. She had, there were different size males, the clothing and all that, the metal plates, as far as the shields that went over and stuff like that, the metal shin guards and all that, the gauntlets. There was no actual distinguishing factor. And so she handled a few things in quite a few ways, in different aspects, of course. But yeah, so when it essentially wasn't necessarily needed of her. They learned that she was her. That's why it's the legends in that regard, because they learned that my buck poo was a female. And when they learned that my buck poo was a female, there were two different groups in the military sort of aspects. Half of them were completely blown away and were like, what do you mean? And they weren't necessarily upset. They just were completely baffled that a female could do that. And then there were the other ones that were, well, we'll just test her. We'll do this and we'll do that and da-da-da. Well, this is where my buck gung comes in. Because he's like, first and foremost, it's the proof. Who are you? He was very progressive for that time frame, especially. Who are you to even think? You can't even do any of the stuff that she did. So why are you even thinking that you have any right to test her? And sort of stuff like that. And so it was this whole huge whatever. And, but nobody knew that my buck Gung had slowly started falling for her. And it's so bad. Because so he does, at this point, he sent a few, actually. It wasn't like one or two, it was a handful of guys. And she's her. She didn't know that he was even interested in her, so him throwing a temper tantrum about her didn't mean anything. She had no idea that he was throwing a temper tantrum about her while she's going and doing her own thing. And it's funny because when they explained it to me, my buck gun was all, yeah, I'm so mad because I've spent so many nights being so angry with her, and then I found out she didn't even know that I was angry with her, and I didn't know whether or not I was more angry at the fact that I was angry that I was courting her and she didn't know about it, or angry at the fact that she was doing what she was doing and then learning that she had no idea. And I was courting her. It was so funny. But yeah, he had sent a few and she just whatever. She was doing her own thing. And she wasn't the type that you can really see my buck poo in me. You really can. My personality is very buck poo-ish. Very, just such levels. And so yeah, he actually sent someone that after the different ones, she was like, well, maybe it's time. Maybe, because the matchmakers couldn't ever do that with her, because she was just herself. No matter how much it just was as it was. And so she unbeknownst to her, this is a guy that was sent to her by my buck Gong, and doesn't necessarily have any connection to what she's done, but could get along well enough. And so she goes to whatever, well, he gets a fire in his belly, not even knowing she's about to do so. And he shows up and he's like, romance or whatever and stuff like that. There's a whole bunch of other stuff in that reference, but yeah. So my scuba diving really has to do with a lot of stuff regarding my buck poo, because my buckum and my buck poo were able to legally immigrate from China to the United States of America before what happened with Mao Zedong, because of meeting my grandpa Gavin. And so there are certain groups and agencies and organizations that some of the stuff that occurs in the water is my buck poo. And so, especially when it comes to the plant life as well in the area, she had gone over a lot of things for them to pay attention to. And so between my Grandpa Gabbett and my Bakgung and my Bakpu, there's certain, I don't know what the words are for it, but there are those who probably do. And yeah, she helped out with a bunch of that and took care of it because it was needed, especially during that time. And so they were in the United States of America before, Mao Zedong didn't really take power until like much later. But when they had immigrated to the United States of America, it was something like 19, so it was part of the initial time frame with my Grandpa Gabbett having a lot to do with a bunch of these different formations of, I don't know the letters, what they stand for. And so they were able to get over here in the United States of America, I think it was something like they were one of the first people that were involved with this. It was something like 1920 or 1930 something. Yeah, I think it was 1920 or 1930 something. And so whatever those acronyms of letters. So my Bakgung and my Bakpu were able to, because they had children in that regard, or a child at the time, and they technically had two. Something happened to the one, and only who would be my grandfather had survived. But yeah, the aspects of menopause, my Bakgung and Bakpu found out that aspect that my Bakpu could actually go through that. And so they did have another child, but I don't know whatever happened. I was told that they had a daughter, but they had to do certain things to make sure that she was correctly taken care of because of certain something in regards to some initial aspect of stuff with my Grandpa Gabbett. And so, yeah, that was what it is. And so, but my Bakpu and my Bakgung did a lot to prepare me where they could. And so when my biological mother, biological father, as I was raised with my biological sister, they would go off to Broadway and wherever, and I would spend time with my Bakgung and my Bakpu and learned about all that sort of stuff. But that was before my head injury, Palm Sunday in 2000, and that was and then 1980s and 1990s, so there's that. And then so yeah, in regards of scuba diving, it's one of those, I had done everything I could because I could remember certain things that my Grandpa Gabbett and my Bakgung and my Bakpu had discussed and or showed in regards of the water and stuff like that. And so I had done my scuba diving in the ways that I thought would be the best, especially after my cognitive issues and memory deficits were explained to me, because I didn't know. I had to have so many appointments where the doctors went over it over and over and over again because it it didn't sink in. I didn't, pun intended, because of the Vandenberg, and scuba diving, 2/3 of a pun. And so the situations regarding my scuba diving, because I knew that I had a lot of doctor appointments and I had my tattoos as best as I could. I actually didn't want to have tattoos on the tops of my palms in the ways that they are, because I thought that I'd be able to be good enough. You know, yeah, I know my wetsuit essentially covered all of my tattoos, but I have these two that I thought would be good enough to assist me if I ever needed that kind of, you know, but no, it was, my scuba diving was like riding a bicycle. As soon as I was in the water, everything was kosher. It was simple. I just needed to know my gear. I needed to know where I had my knives. And I had a lot of them. Because I had stuff I had to handle, and in a different way. That's a different way of handling, I guess is one way to put it. But yeah, you know, there's certain aspects in reference to the Bermuda Triangle. And with that, that has to do with certain things regarding when I was growing up and learning things, as far as the spirituality stuff. And with that, and the scrolls that I was able to learn from, and several other things, because they had papyrus scrolls. I actually know the texture, the thick, it's thick, but it's not necessarily rice paper material. But for those who know regarding my Medal of Honor art project, that's about the texture of some of the scrolls for the papyrus that I actually got to read from in Cantonese. I can't read Cantonese anymore. But that's about, especially my first ones. My first Medal of Honor art project pieces, that is the closest consistency to the feeling of the scrolls that I was able to read when I was a child. Because I have a bunch of experiences that they are what they are. And so, but yeah, in comparison, of course, my Medal of Honor art project is much different in comparison to the scrolls that I got to learn from, and I wish I could remember what they had written on them, and I wish I could remember how to read Cantonese. I know that you read from right to left, similarly to reading the Torah, but there's certain ways that the Cantonese read that are different, and there's also certain, similarly to the different languages within just Spanish or French, there's the different ways that you actually read Cantonese depending on certain characteristics. It's a very intricate language to learn how to read. So it's kind of irony referencing a neurologist that I had for an appointment after my scuba diving. She had gone over how instead of A, B, C, D, E, F, G down the alphabet, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, blah, 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 my thoughts go from A to like 500 bazillion to 2. To G. To 1. To L. To J. To 700. For an example. And I think that has to do with how I was raised. in reference to learning how to read Cantonese. And so that's what it is. So, but yeah, I got to learn that, and the after effects from my head injury are as they are. However, I do the best that I can, and I know that that's something that some people have had an issue with when it comes to a lot of things in my life. And after effects from my head injury definitely didn't assist that. And the fact that I am such a dork, I am how I am about learning, that it's not the most common way to do things, I guess. And the way I learn, especially after waking up from my coma, it's different, to put it mildly. And it's a situation that I've done the best I could, and I could have gone over the situations in reference to scuba diving if it wasn't so much of an issue. My tattoos actually were an issue for scuba divers because, after certain scuba dives and then doing surface intervals, take off the wetsuit and, kind of let it line dry or whatever, or just roll some of it down. And even though I didn't have my sleeve at the time, I had this, and it didn't have this part of the color, it was all one color, I had to get it redone. And then I had this one, I had this part and this part, by a certain point I had this part and that, but not that. And then there's one underneath here that I had, obviously I went over that, and then this, just not the peony underneath, but the prayer right there. And so when I would take off the top part of my two-piece for my wetsuit, and just either sit in my farmer john or take my farmer john and just kind of roll it down to my hips, the scuba divers at the time, well, why do you say you need your tattoos? Why would you need your tattoos if they're covered up, And I do need them. That's why I don't wear gloves. I have gloves. I just don't wear them when I scuba dive. They're not helpful to me. They're more of a problem wearing gloves when I scuba dive, so there's no point. And then, if I got out of my wetsuit, the whole thing regarding the shorty part as well as the farmer john part, and would just wear my shorts or my capris, well, what would make you think that, because they didn't believe certain things? And it's like, I don't need to see them all the time. I mean, there are points when I do need to see them, but there are certain factors of who I am that I don't need to always see them. I do every day need to see them, but I don't need to stare at them the same way. You're getting lost in the details. It's an overall thing. I know what my tattoos are. I know where they are. I know all that sort of stuff. I don't need to go over it the way you apparently need me to explain to you, which I shouldn't have to explain my tattoos to you. You're a scuba diver. That's not your job as my scuba dive instructor. Your job as my scuba dive instructor is to actually teach me. And so, not being rude in this reference, because even if there was someone that I could have been in a relationship with when earning my scuba diving certifications, I was a waitress before. And I'm very particular. I'm very lenient when it comes to certain things, but if in that reference there had been the discussion beforehand as far as that was concerned, Well, there are those who understand that. And, you know, there's really very few scuba diving certifications that I earned that I didn't have to explain my own tattoos to people. And so whether it was to the scuba dive instructors themselves and or other people in the class that they didn't get to focus on the classwork itself, I just personally didn't have the patience for that. That's your job was to take care of certain things. Your job was not to ask me about my tattoos and the scuba diving certifications. Your job was to teach me certification stuff, and that's it. I mean, yeah, I get you want to have the interpersonal discussions and stuff like that. That's cool. I was there for my instruction as far as my classes. I wasn't there for anything other than that. I was raised a certain way, and one of the biggest factors as to how I was raised was I was to go and get my education. I wasn't ever to go to a school and find my MRS. That was not allowed by Mike. That was that was a big deal. That was huge. So I wasn't allowed to date until I was 16 years old, and after a certain point, I was informed that I wasn't allowed to date people in the high school I was in, because that had to be completely separated because of the need to focus on education. It's a big deal. My biological father put 4 people through college to earn his way back in certain things. And so, and it wasn't even his fault. It is what it is. And so I didn't get into scuba diving, especially in the school that I did, for that. I wasn't, there was one instructor that I did have a crush on, but not while I'm scuba diving, not while I'm learning. That's not an option. I'm very particular. It's a very big deal, and I had a huge crush on this guy. Huge, like, just, hi. However, because of additionally being such a dork, because I really am, again, I took Greco-Roman Latin by choice. When I went to the high school and went through the guidance counselor's office and stuff, and we went over the different selections, so I'll pretend right now. So I was sitting in my chair, right? Okay. My biological mother is just like, oh, well, this, that, and the other, and she sends, hands me the paper, and I look at the paper, and I'm like, oh, you have Latin. Oh, that's great. I want to take Latin. And the guidance counselor goes, well, I see that you are excited about Latin. Yeah, we have plenty of openings for that. Cool, this is great. I'm going to take Latin. It's going to be so cool. I'm going to be so smart. My biological mother, sit down. I don't want to. I'm going to take Latin. Because it wasn't available in the high school that I was transferring from, so I was like, okay. So then, I sit back down, and I was like, such a nerd, I don't care. I am the biggest dork ever to be so excited over that, but it helped in the long run, especially with verbal. So that's kind of a big deal on that. And so, yeah, I know how to talk. From this video, you can tell and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And I can make the joke about, having gone through my confirmation class and being an ordained reverend. So by all technicalities, I know how to talk. I actually had, before I end this particular video, I'd actually created a couple of groups in the state of Texas. And there were different lunches where you could sit down, and I left it as an open-ish amount of time because I know myself. But I also know that there are other people that can discuss things. So I think it was like a 2-hour thing that I had originally set up, and then it was, you know what, we need to have a patio area. That way we could just sit and, everybody goes and gets their own food, or, however the staff does it, so that way everything's taken care of and there's no issues in reference to anything else, so that way it's paid right on the spot. And just make sure you don't leave a mess for the staff, and we would sit and talk and go over quite a few different topic points. So this just really different in comparison because it's a video instead. But comparatively, where I'm at, I can actually wear what I want. Because I was not about to be walking around in the daytime at that point wearing a corset. However, then there's the downtown Austin rallies where, it was just ideal and befitting. And so, for certain rallies, not all of them, not all of the rallies, only certain ones. But yeah, so anyway, I'm gonna bring that to a close. And so I've been thinking about certain things. I've been looking at a few things, so I have to figure it out because it's just me. And so unlike when in Texas, I knew the areas at those times, I haven't had the ability to certain references, and I'm very particular. And so, because I know how I am, and I know how others can be, and so doing what I can to figure that out. So you guys have a good one. Make sure to like my video and subscribe to my channel, and go to my website, www.susanmeeling.com, and go and share the video link and stuff like that. You have a good one. Although I can also really quickly, the process of my YouTube, my official YouTube channel, I know that there are ways to edit videos. I know this. I've known this for years. I personally don't do that. And there are reasons for that. And it is not in any offense towards anyone. I know for a fact that with my earlier YouTube videos, the ability for people to look at the progression, there are ways which the backgrounds, the different nuances as far as certain audible factors are able for certain people to pick up. And so there are reasons why, even though I technically could whatever as far as filter, which I don't have patience for, technically as far as editing, like certain whatever it is for the wording, it is on purpose. There is a methodical portion of that, because while in the time frame that I allowed it to be uploaded, as well as the fact that they're still there, it is for not just the current individuals, it's also in reference to future aspects. So the way for me to explain it is they're car shop classes, and people who they don't necessarily, maybe they do need the tax write-off, maybe they don't need the tax write-off, but they have an extra vehicle that, you know, the guys at the class, not male or female, just East Coast thing, they can take the car and learn how to do certain things. They can figure out how certain mechanisms can work, or they can take the engine apart and then look at different things to be able to find better ways for a vehicle. Well, in that reference, those older videos, and I'm not going to go into it in other videos that I can think of, but in this one I think it's important, the different aspects are for when, and I'm sure it's probably already kind of been tinkered with a little bit, but it is not in reference for the way people do Mimi stuff. That's not what that's in reference for. What it is in reference for are the different ways to learn how to, there are different types of sounds in the background, whether it's the highway or the apartment. And so it's kind of like a Blue's Clues sort of thing, but for technology. But for people to learn how to pay attention to certain details, because if, even in reference to now in 2021, if you were to go to some of those older videos, especially the ones where it's spoken word, not like this spoken word, but like the ones where I'm reading and that sort of stuff, and there's no music. There's actually music in my apartment if you have the ear to pick it up. So there was a ceiling fan that was running. There's the apartment complex that I was living in at the time. There was the highway nearby. There were different businesses nearby. There's another couple of living areas nearby as well, and several other factors. And so it's not only something to train in reference to the technological aspects for people to pay attention to, but it's also for those who, I've known people who have had the tubes put into their ears. I've known people who have had surgeries over that. I've known people who have had the hearing aids put in and a few other aspects, and they have made attempts, and this is back in the 1990s mainly, they had made attempts to explain what they were picking up on sounds because they couldn't distinguish it, and they didn't have certain reference points. Well, with the way certain aspects are, as births have been going, it's one of those, in a medical way, of being able to assist when it comes to children, especially, but adults as well, because I know that there are adults that get the hearing aids and stuff. And so it's a way to assist in case, whether it's in an everyday discussion or if there's ever a situation that they need to be able to distinguish. And so that's why, even though I know that the footage isn't as pretty, it is more for the background aspects. So just wanted to point that out there. And there's also the head injury aspects of people who deal with headaches and migraines, or they just, after a certain point, the high definition is too much for their visual, as far as their eyesight. And so I thought that for people who, they normally pay attention to only the really high definition, and then they've had to get corrective surgeries. I knew a few people in the 1990s who did that. or they've grown up only on the technology stuff and hardly ever really went outside, but they don't want to have another corrective surgery, or they don't want to constantly wear glasses or different things. I thought that leaving that there in the unedited raw format, that it would be able to assist with clarifying the vision in certain ways in a modernized homeopathy Ayurvedic technology revision of medical aspects. So that way, because I've dealt with a bunch of stuff after my head injury, and well before, of course. And so I just kind of figured maybe that might be something that could be assistive in a different way. So I know that, yes, whatever I'm wearing in that reference, it is what it is. But the fact that I have certain tattoos showing because of the footage, the ability to train your own eyes to see more clearly, while not denying still gonna need the glasses. Maybe it doesn't have to be as strong of a prescription. Or maybe the lenses don't have to be as thick. Or different ways of working with, while acknowledging there is the need for. So hopefully that makes more sense as far as why I kept those up there, because I know that people have their comments, and that's their comments, and people have their opinions, and that's their opinions. My purposes for doing certain things and in the ways that I do them are very complex and multifaceted. There's not ever just one reason. They're all of the best of intentions. There's all the ways in regards of how would be best to do healing in those references. But the reality of acknowledging any type of healing means the need to notice. It doesn't mean you have to accept the negative, but you have to acknowledge it, because you can't have healing without acknowledging certain factors. So in order to have healing, if there was no need for healing, then you wouldn't need to have that. But if you have the need for healing, then you have to be able to acknowledge what it is that there is the healing of. So the Latin word breakdown, as far as the Roman and Greco sub and root words, as well as the prefixes and stuff, dis, D-I-S, or Delta Indigo Sierra, is one part of the word disease, and then ease, or E as in echo, A as in alpha, S as in Sierra, E as in echo, they both have individual meanings. So dis would be, the problem, the situation that needs to be looked at, reviewed, and finding the different ways to find, to get to the healing point for ease, or for comfort, or however in that reference. So in the dissection of that word into the two separate aspects, you have the capability of, in reference to the videos and that, having that taken into consideration. So even in regards of the videos that I did discuss my scuba diving, you can actually take a look at the videos where there's the computer screen that I have in the background compared to the book pictures, or book wording with the pictures, to see what I mean in reference to ways of why I chose the clothing that I did. There are reasons for that. There are reasons for the color of the clothing. There's reasons for the cut of the clothing. There's reasons for where the angle of the cameras are. There's many, many reasons behind that. So hopefully that makes sense. and I hope you guys have a good one. Or good day, good weekend, good night, good morning. Depends on what time you watch that.